Okay, let's talk about writing clean code. And when I'm talking about clean code, I'm talking about learning how to write code that's going to work on as many devices as possible. And in order to do that, you need to know a little bit about the document object model, also called the DOM. When HTML5 was developed, the main kind of driving goal is that they wanted to stick by this standard, that any new features should be based on HTML, CSS, the DOM, and JavaScript. And you can have a chance to learn about each one of those. But I want to talk about the DOM for just a little bit because it's going to help you understand the HTML a little bit better. One of the things about geeky computer scientists like myself is that we love trees. Not like trees outside that are green and beautiful in the fall. We like mathematical trees. These tree-like structures that we can prove to be valid or invalid. Okay? So when we talk about HTML as a tree, we're talking about this idea that at the very root of the tree, we are going to be creating HTML. All right? And then, off here, and then from that tree, when we say, I'm going to make an HTML document, we want two parts. We want the head over here, and we want the body. In the head, we're going to keep all that kind of information that the user isn't going to see for the most part. The one difference is we might talk about the title, but we're going to have all that kind of hidden stuff nobody really cares about. In the body is where we're going to learn to put all of our HTML5 tags. So let's talk about HTML as a tree. All right? In this case, I'm showing you this idea that at the root of every HTML page should be what's called the HTML tag. That kind of thing that says, lets the browser know, I'm going to be giving you certain types of tags, and here's how I want them to work. If we don't look at it as a picture, I can also kind of just tell you that every tree has three parts to a well-formed document. The Doctype, which is the version of HTML that you're going to be using. The head, which is all of the metadata, or kind of extra information. And the body. The body is the displayable content, the thing that most people are going to get back when they do the request-response cycle. So let's talk Doctype. You are so lucky. When I was creating web pages at first, and we were in HTML4, we had to come up with all these different ways to kind of explain whether our HTML4 was like very strict standards or whether it was transitional. In HTML5, it's very simple to say, nope, there's only one thing, and it's called Doctype HTML, and you're all set. For the head, which is inside the head tag, we're going to have all this additional information used by the browser. So for instance, you might want to say what language you're creating your page in. You could also include, and you really want to include, what the title of your page is. And when I'm talking about the title, I'm not talking about big kind of header that you see. I'm talking about the little tiny thing you see in the tab of your browser. Later, you might want to add supporting files as well. You might want to have CSS files that will style your page, or JavaScript that can add on different interaction, or really any type of add-ons that's going to change the way people view and interact with your site. Other than the title, the metadata is not displayed. People will not see it. What people do see is the information that's in your body tag. That body tag is the bulk of your page. So it's very important to write well-formatted or tree-like code where you're making sure that every tag has an end, that you're not putting tags in weird orders. So most of the content in the body is displayed by the browser, but every once in a while there's a little bit of metadata in there too. But we're not going to hit that in this class. So let's look at an example. Right here, I have a file called template.html, and I'm displaying the code here on the screen for you. Can you find the three parts of a well-formed document? The first thing you want to look for is the Doctype. We've got that right here, letting them know that this is an HTML5 document. We then have that HTML tag, which was the root of our really scientific tree, and I'm letting people know I'd like the language that it's displayed in to be English. In the head section, we've got that metadata, where it's telling us things like, hey, I know that there's lots of different keyboards and ways across the world to represent letters. I want you to use what's called UTF-8. Don't worry, just use it every time. And then the next part of my metadata is the title, where we want to see it saying my first page. That's it. That's 2 of the 3 parts. The last part is the body tag, and it's displaying, the content that we want to see on the screen. So let's look at this in a browser. What do I have? I have my title way up here and my displayable content right down there. Okay, I've written the code. The next step you should always do is validate the code. Say, okay, I've written code, it looks good, but I know that browsers, are very nice and they make things display nicely even when I haven't written good code. So if you go to validator.w3.org, you can check any website to see if the code is valid. And you have 3 choices. You can upload the URL, you can upload a file, or you can actually copy and paste your code and put it right in there. In this case, I've put in the URL to template.html. Run check, and yay! Not surprisingly, because I knew I was going to be taping this, it successfully checked. Don't worry about warnings. Warnings are usually in to kind of cover themselves. What if you want to validate your file, but your files aren't actually on the internet yet? Let's walk through really quickly an example of how you can do that. Let's say that I have my file template.html and I want to check it. And I want to point out to you that I went in and I changed the file and I put in an intentional typo. I spelled the closing tag for title incorrectly. So let's see what happens and if the browser or the validator can find this. What I'm going to do is I went to validator.w3.org and I'm now going to select the third option, validate by direct input. I go back to my file, Command A or Control A if you're on a PC, Command C. I copied all the code and now I want to put it in the validator. Hit check. Up. And if we scroll down here, I can make this a lot bigger for you. You can see that I did get 2 errors. Uh-oh, why did I get 2 errors when I only typed 1 error in? Well, validators are never perfect, all right? So what error it found is it said, uh-oh, I found the end of a file and I was not expecting that. Well, the reason that happened is let's check out error number 2. It tells us, oh, you forgot to close the title tag. So sometimes 1 error can cause a lot of error messages. So don't worry. I've seen as many as 50 or 60 errors that once they corrected 1 line of code, it fixed more than 80% of those errors. So I'm going to go back over to my code. I'm going to fix it and put that title in, save it, copy it again, put it in, and I'm going to check again. And this time, checking complete, no errors. So just to review, you really want to follow DOM structure if you want a well-formed page. And following that structure means you always use beginning and end tags. Also, you close inner tags before outer ones. And what that means is if you start a title tag, you've got to end it before you end the body tag. All right? You also will want to use valid attributes, which is one of the things we're going to talk about a little later when we talk about images and basically parts of your page that need extra information. The problem with browsers is that they'll actually fix bad code for you. I always call them the helicopter parents of coding. It's like, oh, I know what you wanted it to look like, so that's the way I'm going to make it look on the screen. The problem is that doesn't always work for everyone. So just because your site looks good to you when you're looking at it on your browser doesn't mean it's right. You have to use a validator to check your code. So here I am at the Shay How textbook, and I'm on the section called Getting to Know HTML. If you're like me, when you're reading things about programming, you read them and you nod along, even when you don't always completely understand what they were talking about, and you wish there was some sort of example or, like a teacher showing you in real time what's going on. Well, Shay How uses CodePen, and that's one of the reasons I really like this textbook. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about. As you scroll down, you'll definitely see that there's places where there's code while you're reading. Oh, for instance, right here. You can see that they're talking about divisions, and they've given a little text, and it's HTML, and you understand the code, but you don't really know what it looks like. Well, if we scroll down a little bit further, you'll come across code that's actually inside something called CodePen. What you want to look for is this caption right here. It actually says Edit on CodePen on it. So let's see what happens when I click on this link. What CodePen does is it gives you a chance to see the HTML and also perhaps the CSS and JavaScript. I know that you don't necessarily understand CSS or JavaScript yet. You may not, but you can still always play with all the different parts. Let me make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. And you can see that they've put in the code for heading level 1, level 2, level 6. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to change it. And I'm going to say, what happens if I change this H3 to an H1? Go over here. You can see that the heading level 3, even though it says heading level 3, is much bigger. I love CodePen, and I really encourage you to always click on it and go in and see what happens when you type things in. You don't need an account, although you can definitely have one. It's a great way to feel like you really understand and own the content. In an earlier lesson, you learned how to include images into your web page. Sometimes, though, people aren't really sure where to find images or they're not very good artists themselves. So today, I want to talk about using Font Awesome. Font Awesome is a collection of icons that you can use for your page, and they're pretty much worldwide recognizable. Here I am at the Font Awesome page. I want to show you how to use it. First thing I'm going to do is go to the Icons selection. As you can see, there are thousands of different icons that you can choose from to help decorate your page. And it's very simple for you to use. The first step is that you need to tell your web page, hey, I want to use Font Awesome. In the Getting Started section of Font Awesome, they give you the code, so let me show you what it looks like. Here I am with a simple file. The only thing that's going to look new to you is that I have two unique ideas. The first is that I have a link in the head section of my page. Remember, the head is where we keep all that extra information that isn't always seen by the user. And what I've done here is I've connected to the Font Awesome CDN. It's a very intimidating acronym that just means Content Delivery Network. You're basically making an agreement where, hey, I'm going to link and use your stuff, but I'm going to use this special link so you know how many people are using it. If we travel down into the body section, that's when you're going to see a new tag, the I tag. It stands for icon. Do you remember the image tag? One of the things you need to have if you're going to use the image tag is the source, what picture it is you want to use. With Font Awesome, you have to include a class tag. And in that class tag, you're going to tell it which picture you want to use. So in this case, I'm using the one called FA Angry. Let's go ahead and see what this page looks like. ta-da! We ended up with an angry little person staring at us. It actually is really straightforward. You get a very little icon each time you include this tag. Now, in all honesty, my screen is blown up really big, so if you were to run this code, the icon would be really small. So let me show you some of the options you can do to adjust the size of your icon. So what I've done is I've gone in and copied that line of code, I don't know, a couple times. And in each one, I added one extra attribute, and that's the size that I want the icon to be. So right here, I said, oh, make that icon extra small. And then I did medium and large. The 2x, 3x, 5x, 10x, etc., that's just making it that much bigger each time. So now, if I look at the page again, it's definitely going to look a little bit different. In fact, it's way too big for the screen, so let me make it a little bit smaller. And there you have it. We have the icons with different sizes. Angry face clearly isn't the only one you can do. Some of the more popular ones you might see include let's do the address card. So I'm going to copy. It always starts off as the I tag with the class equals. You need to have FAS for font awesome. And then instead of angry, let's go ahead and try an address card. And this one hopefully will look kind of familiar to you. I'm going to put a line break in just to mix things up a little bit there. Now when I refresh the page, you can see a very familiar little address card. Icons are great because they give your page this kind of really familiar look that people think it looks really professional. But there are some downsides to using icons if you're not careful. The most important being that they're not necessarily accessible by default. So if you were to turn a screen reader on this page, it would actually show up as if there's no content at all. Or even worse, sometimes people use icons for social media links. So let me show you one more example before we're done with font awesome. So what I've done here is instead of just using these icons as decoration, I've actually put them into my site so that if I wanted to say link to my Twitter account, right down here, I would include the Twitter icon. If I wanted to connect to Pinterest, I could use this Pinterest icon right there, and LinkedIn. And it actually looks really good. Let me show you. Here we go. I've got each of my links. Just so you know, the reason these icons are blue is again because they're links. And on each one, I could click on it and it would take me to my account. Here's the problem. It looks great, but I'm going to run a quick wave validator check on it to see if my code is semantically correct. So I'm going to go to my hosted version. Pause. Is it here? Let me find it. I'll just do it right here. So I'm not using the code I was just using because in order to validate, I wanted to go ahead and put it on the server. So I'm going to go up and I'm going to click on my Wave validation tool. And Wave is going to go through and give me 3 errors. Not just any 3 errors, but 3 very important errors. And that is simply that, hey, you have 3 links and they don't actually have any text. Someone who's using a screen reader would have no idea where this link is supposed to go to. It doesn't know that this is Twitter or Pinterest or LinkedIn. But I have a really simple, quick fix for that. All right. I'm going to use something called an ARIA label, either in my A tag or actually in the icon tag as well. I simply put ARIA label equals, and in this case, I'm going to put Twitter. On the next one, I can add ARIA label equals Pinterest, etc. By adding in these ARIA labels, you're basically giving screen readers the ability to tell somebody where this link is going to go, to read a label. And this is huge in terms of accessibility. So I hope you have fun using Font Awesome. There are so many different ones you can choose from, but if you're going to play with some of these cool tricks, make sure that you're making them accessible to as many people as possible.